all the time I say customs the hardest
I feel like a little talk show host right now.
You're back on the stage!
This is so exciting. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the first, hopefully annual alumni panel. Yeah, love that. We will be discussing theater after Vanderbilt, cultivating a career in the arts. Oh, hello, friends. No,
Join us,
you're
yay.
so fine. Thanks for rolling in.
Wouldn't be the first time. This guy.
Actually, Will's early by his standards. Sorry. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming. I would love to have a round of applause for the alumni. Love it. With us today, we have Madeline Fansler, Will Bonfiglio, and Jessica Owens. So, yay. All class of 2011. Super exciting.
No, 2012.
2012?
Yeah.
You said 11.
Maybe it was 2011-12.
Okay.
Could have been
No,
a
yeah, it's honestly.
could have been a dash situation.
Apologies.
No, that's fine. It's like, I was like, is that when we graduate?
Yeah, so just to give y'all some context of who these awesome people are up here. So Madeline works as a professional actress. She is based in New York City, but she has toured the country as a swing on the national tour of Kinky Boots.
Oh, look, I dressed the part.
She was working as a swing on the musical Six on a cruise ship, learning 3 of the lead roles, but right when the contract ended, she joined the Australian company of Six for their Sydney season and got back literally 2 days ago. So we're very lucky to have her.
She is. Yes.
And then Will spent a year in Spain on a Fulbright scholarship after leaving Vanderbilt. He later earned a master's in nonprofits management at Washington University, and he now works at the Nonprofit Center of Creative Arts in St. Louis, Missouri, where he leads a program that recruits theater professionals to design workshops and translate their skills for application by various businesses and corporations, which is super cool. HOD in theater. Love that very much. And then Jessica is the Manager of Administration and Labor Relations for the Roundabout Theater Company in New York City. After Vanderbilt, she spent a year at in London at the Royal Academy for Dramatic Arts, then returned to the States to intern in the Literary Manager Department at the Public Theater. Previous to her job at Roundabout, she worked in labor relations for the Broadway League. So, got some super cool alumni with us today. Yeah, so before we jump into all the questions and things, I just wanted to let you all know that I'm currently doing an honors thesis in theater with the working title, What Skills Do Vanderbilt Theater Majors Gain from Their Undergraduate Education That Prepares Them to Enter Any Number of Fields? So basically just transferable skills in theater and examining that. And of course, we all know how valuable theater is to your business development, but also your personal development and personal growth, but sometimes that's a hard story to tell other people. So that was something that I was hoping to get y'all here for today. And I know that they all had a lot of questions that they're very excited to ask. And yeah, so today's panel, along with all the questions, are a key component to researching my question. So thank you all in the audience for being here today. Super appreciate that. Yeah, so quick intro. It's important for students to think about the career growth and development that can happen just 10 years after they're outside of school. So we're so happy that you guys are here today to share that story. And the questions I'm asking are questions that came from my peers when I sat down with them for lunch a couple weeks ago and got to have a discussion about what the heck the future holds for creatives. So this will be super, super helpful for them. Yeah, so we can just kick it off with our first question. So what's it like being back in Neely? Do you have a favorite memory
The old
here?
stomping ground.
Any mistakes you guys have made?
That's all we were like, we walked in and Will was like, Maddie, do you remember when you were a nun over there? And I was like, I don't remember that, but I remember when I got my shoe caught in my dress over there and like hopped up all the stairs. And Will was like, oh yeah, that's the show I had a cockroach on my costume.
Yes, that was the same one. And we wore shower curtains. was a great time.
It is a flood, though. It does feel like a flood of. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's a good.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, yeah. But I mean, I think it's great to be back. It feels like no time has passed at all. But also, like, it's a totally different campus from when we were here as well, and a totally different city. So it's a lot of like, wow, did I even go here? Because the campus has changed entirely.
Yeah.
So.
There's something nice that this is.
It feels the same. Yeah, it feels very comforting.
Thing that feels right. So.
Well, because one of the things about Neely is that it is so like adaptable, and so I think to some extent it's so adaptable that it doesn't need to change in the same way that like other places might like need to continue to grow.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's great. Have you guys been back to Vanderbilt since you graduated at all?
I've been back several times for weddings, and I will walk around. I'll do like a little walk around, but each time it feels completely different because it's changing so quickly. But yeah, I think I've been back like 4 times for various. Trust me, there will be many weddings that you have to come back here for. Yeah.
Same, like a few times for weddings, but never back to Neely, I don't think.
Yeah,
So
I don't think I've ever come back to this.
I don't know if I've been
space.
back here since, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been back. I haven't been back as much, I used to come back a lot more when I first graduated, and then kind of like petered out. But I did come back to Neely a couple years ago. My mom and I were walking the campus, and I was just like, let's just see if it's open, and it was. My mom was like, let's go look at your pictures upstairs.
Oh, I love that.
That's sweet. Awesome. My next question is, what theater experience did you have at Vanderbilt, in or out of class, that you found most valuable?
Oh, most valuable.
I know my answer.
You go.
Which I want to go first because I feel like it might be similar for them. The Maymester was definitely the thing that changed.
That was great.
Answer.
Yeah, I was like, we all actually went on our Maymester together. Yeah, it was
We have
just
a lot of Maymester people
Yeah,
in this room.
I left. Like when I went on my Maymester, I had a theater minor, and after like seeing the Maymester and like seeing, I was like, oh, I don't know what on earth I'm going to do, but there appear to be enough jobs to support this entire like industry, so I'll come back and like change my major. And took like 110. Well, you don't have 110. I took like an intro class like a senior because of like where I like ended up, but the Maymester like for sure changed like the trajectory for me.
I really liked being on board, the UT board. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I feel like it was a great way to like culminate everything we'd learned, and you were given like this sort of real world responsibility. Felt like those experiences really were transferable to sort of a real world environment. Yeah, I loved board, but that's because I'm an overachiever.
What kind of things did you do on board that felt transferable? This is the research part, guys.
I think at that stage of your life, you're like really being treated as like a peer to faculty members, which I thought was really valuable in terms of like entering a workforce and sort of having to, because you're so used to all the way growing up always being with people the same age, and then you graduate and you're like, wow, there's, like in this, actually the last experience I just did with Six, there were a lot of cast members that were younger than me, and that was the first time that it really happened. Yeah. But it's like I used to be the young cast member, so it's like you have to learn to sort of communicate ideas and goals with people who are just not your direct peers. So I think that was helpful with board, and just like I don't know, trying to come up with creative ideas for. Because I feel like our boards really tried to do creative stuff for the students and like think outside of the box. Yeah. Oh, I also love freshman showcase. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what both of you said. I think it's interesting how here you get to like do plays with anyone from Vanderbilt, and there's something great about that, as like it's not necessarily a transferable skill, but I think the opportunity to meet people you may not have met otherwise, like even in those classes that you have to take for like the liberal arts requirements, right, that aren't theater based. But it's neat that like there's someone in your show who's an education major or is studying engineering, or and it's not someone who you may not have met them otherwise, and then those people can be great networks for you later. So I think that that's been really something I've enjoyed post Vanderbilt, is like these friends I made from theater classes or from doing theater shows here at Neely. So I think Vanderbilt's great in that way, that you get to do the shows, and for the classes, it's like there's no, I don't know, you take it all. Like you whether you like it or not, like you're doing intro senior year, doing production, you're taking acting class or directing class, you're taking the history and the theory, and so I love that like you get all of it. So it makes you more of I think a generalist. That's really a great,
much more
way to market
valuable
yourself.
too. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Okay, in your interaction with people in the professional world who don't have theater experience, how do they view theater experience and the skills that come from theater, and do they understand how that can be valuable? Is there a bias? Is it a strong bias?
That's a really good question.
I feel like I don't feel that in New York, really, just
That's
because
good.
so many people are. You don't even have to be pursuing theater in any way, but people are producers. People, like everyone has their hand in theater in some way in New York. That I feel like it's pretty common. Like I feel like most people have a relationship to theater in New York. So I feel like I don't really feel any sort of pushback.
I think that I think there is like whenever I tell someone that I work in theater, because saying I'm the manager of administration and labor relations around about theater company is just like does not roll off the tongue, and they're like, oh, are you an actress? And I'm like, absolutely not, and they're just like, I do think that there's like a inability to think beyond like, are you like an actress, or do you like write plays, or do you direct them, and then like that's it. It's like I don't know what else you could like do.
And
it's like a bunch of other stuff. And I do think that like in New York is interesting, and some of my experience is interesting, because I do think that like there's not that knowledge of like what goes into a show. I think that people don't necessarily understand the scope of like professional theater and like how big scale certain things are. So like, at the Broadway League, when I was like, sorry, I can't do X, Y, and Z, I have to go like negotiate for like everyone's out, it's COVID and everyone's out on tour, and like we have to do stuff, and people are like, what do you mean? I don't understand. It's like, well, you know how like all of the literal Broadway tours that go around the country that are worth like millions of dollars and employ like thousands of people, everyone out there is stuck, and so I have to go figure out how to get them home. And people are like, oh, that's not at all what I thought like the process is. And I think that like, I imagine as an actor you have the similar experience of like, no, this show costs like $12 million.
Right. Yeah. I guess that is a good point. Like the scale of it is
difficult to understand from the outside.
Is estimated quite frequently. I love, especially when Jess and I get together in the city, it's very like we come from two different sort of lanes in theater, but it's like we'll be able to sort of talk shop about like, oh, what's going on your side? It's like, well, we hate it over on our side, or like, this is going great on our side. It's like, well, we didn't like that on our, it's like a very interesting perspective.
Nice. I like that.
But I agree with you. I don't think the scale is really understood, or and also like how much of an undertaking it is to send, this many people out to cover 80 cities in this amount of time.
Right.
And I think they also don't understand really like the differences always between, smaller scale, larger scale.
That's definitely true. Like I'll take my friends to shows and they'll be like, oh, was that a Broadway show? And I'll be like, yes. It was, like I've taken you to this theater 18 times.
Yeah.
Which is great. I actually think that's important to have perspective of like, when you were talking about like doing theater without people who are not theater majors, one of the things I liked about that was the perspective of people who are like, there's a lot of ways you can be involved in theater. You don't have to obsess over it, make it your whole life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question for that. Has there been a way that's worked best for y'all to kind of express that to people? Like any comparison you've been able to make with another job in the world or something like that?
I feel like with touring, especially, they just assume you're living this like rock star lifestyle, and you're like, it's insanely not that. So, I think most of the time you're spending a lot of time just like undoing assumptions, not necessarily like comparing it to another job. You're just like, this is what I do, and then they come at you with like 10 ideas about that, and you say, well, that was true, that was sort of true, that was false, and you sort of end up playing that game a little more, as opposed to like comparison, really.
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes, I mean, because like I don't even know what I would say to someone to like tell them what a swing is, like in terms
There's
of
no like.
you just have to explain how it is, and then they'll tell you all the things that they think about it, and you'll undo half of them.
The one thing I do say sometimes that seems to like help people understand certain things is that a Broadway show is like, every single Broadway show is like a startup. Like they don't exist, like commercial Broadway shows, they don't, you make a company for it, you incorporate, you make an LLC, you build up the entire infrastructure around it. So like that's the answer to a lot of questions of like, well, why is there no HR for Broadway, which we're getting better at? Like, why is and it's like, because every single like Broadway show is a whole company that someone invented just for this purpose.
Sure.
So that seems to get people to understand a little bit of like kind of what the structure is.
And I think, like, for me, it's a little of the opposite, I think. Like, so before this job I've been in, I worked in a few other jobs at, like, academic institutions in international education, always, like, in education in some way. And oftentimes, being the theater person, they'd be like, oh, well, you're giving the presentation. Or,
Oh my, it's so
you know how
real,
to do
yeah.
social media, they think.
That's so
weird.
real.
Yeah, there's this weird, like, so this is good, again, good or bad for y'all. I don't know. Like, exploit it as you can.
Or
and
don't
want to.
tell anyone.
But they'll expect, like, oh, you can be the one doing the presentation, or you should be the one doing the marketing, or you should be the one, doing, like, these things that they think doing theater is. And so that, I think, is just something to think about as, like, a transferable skill, that there's almost a stigma or an expectation of that, or a perception, but you could play that up if that works for you and you love that. And if not, that's something I would say, like, be aware of,
Yeah, keep
that
to
they might
yourself.
be expecting you to, like, pick up these pieces because of that degree. Which for me is like, I don't know, I love a script, right? I'm like, yeah, I can present it if they'll write me something.
Yeah, sure.
But like, I don't do improv.
Yeah.
I do theater,
We didn't-
so
yeah, sure.
but I think that there's something about that that's like, you have to almost train them what theater is and like what are the things you bring to the table if those aren't the things that they think, and so you have to align on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are all wonderful answers. Thank you. Okay, this is a question probably mainly for Madeline, but please feel free to chime in. So the theater department here definitely has different expectations than a BFA theater program, of course. I found that one of the most interesting things that we talked about during our interview last time. And some of my peers here are hoping to go into acting, and they were curious, what is it like going to a university where you didn't receive a BFA, and how has that perception been in the industry?
I don't think it matters, honestly. I mean, probably people who went to a BFA program think it matters, but.
Are we getting that? I hope.
Well, no, I just think that, like, especially now, the trend in the industry, and I hope it remains this way, is very much like bringing your authentic self to, as gone are the days, thank God, of the jewel tone dress and the nude pump at an audition. And I think it's very much, we're starting to embrace sort of the individual. And now you see people in Broadway shows who have 12 credits or have never done a show in their life. And it's like, this pendulum swings so wide at this point that, like, I think the only way the BFA will occasionally help you is if the casting director or one of the creatives behind the table went to that program. Because you do see that occasionally, of like, oh, I went to Michigan, so I'm going to invite all my Michigan. But like, even then, talent will always supersede, in my opinion. And I do think that the trend of the industry of being like, we just want authentic personalities, I think sometimes, well, the BFA programs, I think, are starting to realize that they can't churn out the same type of performer because it's like, it just doesn't translate anymore. So in a way, I think it also can be a hindrance of like, if you've gone through this machine and you don't know who you are anymore. And that's why I think I actually like will die on this hill of like, I think this was the best decision I made for my career, because I really feel like I could have gone to a musical theater BFA program, but instead I was a theater major and a music minor, and you stand on both feet equally, and you also meet a bunch of people who don't do that, which I think is major in terms of like, you know, being able to talk to a room of creatives and like not be a robot. Like they want,
Or like completely neurotic.
yeah. Well, because like for Kinky Boots, for Six, for all, like for any of my long gigs, all of the callback processes, they say we could have cast you after round 2 of callbacks, but they have 10 rounds of callbacks to make sure you're not an asshole. Like that's the whole point, and they want to see you on a bad day to see how you handle. Because like you're spending 9 months on a bus with these people.
Yeah.
So much of what goes into hiring you is actually about you being. Like most of the jobs I've gotten have come from the job before because the people on the job before liked working with me. Yes, does talent play a role? Of course. But I think people skills and being an authentic, kind, approachable person will always be. So yeah, the BFA, don't sweat it.
That's awesome. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
My thing that I agree with everything Maddie has just said. The thing I say, I'm asked more often with folks about if they should consider a master's program. And generally my response is, it's not a very like, I don't know, it sounds odd to say, but like, look, if you can get into like the top 3 program and whatever the thing is, if you want to do, if you can get into the Yale playwriting program, if you can get into like the the Old Globe like acting program, great. Otherwise, your next 3 years are much better spent just like auditioning and like working. Because you can learn those skills. And like in the same amount of time, you can get in the same room that those like master's degrees would get you into in the same amount of time. If you're working.
I also think Vandy too, like, that's an impressive degree.
Yes.
Hello? Like, so I do think also this degree helps in the sense of like, oh, they're talented and they're smart, which is valuable, for sure. Yeah.
I think we forget that being here in this
Yeah,
bubble. That,
absolutely.
Like, oh, right. Like, I actually am in a top 20 school. That's
100%.
probably a good thing.
Right, and once you graduate, you tell people that, they're like, damn, well done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the rankings keep getting better.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. Nice work. Proud of you all. Like, hey.
Thank Columbia for their scandal. That's what pumped us up.
But no, I agree. I think like to what you were saying too about there's been such a change, right? Like the people who were not only coming out, well, the people who were coming out of the BFA programs were the people who were going in, which were a very homogenous group of people for
100%.
years. And I think like we're at a place as an industry where like that's not acceptable anymore, and we're holding people accountable for that, right? So I think if you historically only know how to select or train a certain group of individuals, then like,
100%.
do you want that degree? Because I don't.
Sure.
And I think there's something to be said about having this different, approach where it's like you are a different person, you bring something different, you bring more of yourself to it, and it's going. And now there are places where that's actually respected and appreciated in the industry where before it wasn't. And so I think we're in a place where it's okay now to not have the BFA.
Yeah.
No, that's really great to hear, especially about the individuality. That makes a lot of sense. One of my best friends from home just got into the Carnegie Mellon MT BFA program, which is like nuts. And that's only 6 people, and something that she said that made the program stand out was that they wanted to like cultivate the individuality over the 4 years and like make you your own actor
Yes.
and artist. And I was like, that I can respect. Like that I vibe with.
Sure.
And I think like in a way we get an opportunity to do that here too. 'cause,
Absolutely.
like,
I
absolutely
we're not
think so.
just pigeonholed into okay, like 8 a.m. ballet classes and then like 10
Right.
a.m. you
Well,
know?
and not only that, it's like you're not waiting until your senior year to do a show.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like the amount we performed was so major. Like, we got so many experiences. And like, one of the best things my vocal coach ever said to me was, because I came out of college sort of being like, oh, I want to do it all. And they were like, what is your, like, you're serving food court right now. What is your Michelin star dish? And like,
that.
what are we going to figure out that like you serve better than anyone else? But I feel like what was amazing about Vandy was like, I got to try everything on. And I came into the world sort of knowing myself and knowing what I do best, as opposed to having to figure that out after, again, being in like a homogenized,
Right.
one-size-fits-all program. Because
Yeah.
there's also like so many opportunities too here to figure out, maybe, yeah, you loved being in the school play when you were younger, but like now you were on board and you're like, damn, I'm like amazing at being the VUT president, so maybe I should like think about the administrative side of theater. It just like, I feel like it makes it clearer that there are so many avenues you can take that aren't necessarily the audition grind.
I love that. I hope that helps anyone who
Yeah,
is nervous
don't
about BFA
fret.
things.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question. So the theater program has prioritized the goal of becoming a more diverse department over the past few years. And we know that this is happening in professional theater as well. And we wanted to ask your perspective on what's going well in that shift, what needs more work, and what anyone entering the profession should expect.
I feel like you should take this one. Me? Yeah, because you like work.
You do have labor in your
Yeah.
Like,
No, but you like, I feel like you
No,
had the
we do-
most
I
like
do,
hands-on
yes.
experience with
yes,
this.
yeah. I think that, sorry, what was the exact question? Because the
Yeah.
words were good at the end, sorry.
No, you're good. Just what's going well in the
Oh, yeah.
shift, what needs more work, and what should anyone entering the profession expect?
Great. I think like one thing that's going well, and this is going to sound kind of strange, is like the sheer like numbers game of it all. Like the amount of like BIPOC like playwrights and female or non-gender conforming like playwrights or directors or actors that are like performing on like large scale stages is just like exponentially increased. I think, which is wonderful. I think the thing that it needs a little bit more work is the like cultural politics of like the workplace. I mean, these institutions are hundreds of years old, and like
yeah.
the ships move very slowly, for better or worse. And there are some instances of where they try to move fast and like they fall apart. Like Victory
Sure.
Gardens Theater recently just kind of like, I'm not saying, no, everyone was in the wrong there, I think a little bit. No, anyway, I'm just saying that like, there's like, it's hard, it's like really hard. And I think that where we could use a little bit more work is like all of these like wonderful like diverse plays have been fast tracked to Broadway the past few seasons, which is great, but for some of them that's been really wonderful. They were ready, and for some of
Sure.
them they were not, and they got, and those artists didn't get the developmental support that play deserved, and now it's going to kind of always be like bookended as like, oh well, it was like fine when had it people like invested the
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
It could have been like really really brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that like folks should know, I mean, the one thing that surprised me whenever I like came to New York and really started working is, for better or worse, like people stay in this industry forever, which means that the
Right.
majority of people who leave the industry are like older cisgendered women, and to the extent that like everyone knows that, but like when you're like sitting in a room full of like 20 people and they literally all look the same, and
Yeah.
their name is all Paul, you know, you're just
Yeah, you're like, whoa.
wow. And it's
Yeah.
also a little bit like Maddie was talking about. The biggest kind of shock there is like the communicating with people of like of exceedingly different like generation and kind of
Absolutely.
like cultural like background as like interesting. I mean, it's a skill though that like once you like talk about it, like work on it and learn it, it's like fascinating. Because for better or worse, people who've been in the industry forever have like stuff to teach you. You know,
Sure.
That's a great skill I think you learn in school is like might take a class that you're not particularly interested in and learning how to pick out the things that like are like take what you like and leave the rest. Like for better or worse, there are like because we have to look to these like male cisgendered folks because they're the only people with like 50 years of experience in the industry, like kind of take what you want and like leave the
Leave
rest
what you
to
don't,
these
yeah,
folks.
for sure.
And try to teach them, you know, as
Yeah,
you can.
yeah.
I think, you know, one of
That's a
the
very good point.
challenges, or I guess depending on how you look at it, but I think, you know, there's pushback from just how now there's a prioritization of agency of the artist and being able to say like, that doesn't work for me. You know, I
Yes.
think as
That's a
artists,
result of the pandemic, I
yeah.
think, big time.
Well, and I think too with like the work now that we're doing in spaces with like intimacy training and thinking
Yeah.
about how do we actually, you know, like you need a budget for that, you need to have an artist for that, you need to like paying people's a whole nother story. We could that's next year's. But you know, I think it's like how do we bring equity into the room in a variety of ways? And one of the ways I think that now is being prioritized is this idea of being able to use your voice to say how you feel. And in the
100%.
past, it's like, oh, well, I don't want them to make me, you know, not like me. Or what if they don't
Yes.
cast me again? I don't want to be, you know,
No,
like what does
yes.
it mean to be like easy to work with? Which means like
Yeah.
a pushover, right? And like we should not do that. And
Right.
so I think finally there's becoming a vocabulary for that and a practice that is just more appreciative of that. And that's important. And I think that's going to open a lot of doors. As long as we continue it, right?
and
So
I
we need to
think
hold them
it's-
accountable.
And I think I think like theater is is an interesting industry in which it has a particular challenges because for a lot of reasons we've discussed already, like the example of a show being a startup, a startup doesn't necessarily have a lot of time, support, or resources to handle whenever people speak up and say, this is not working for me. And so we're really trying to like figure that out, because I understand when someone says that blah, blah, blah doesn't work for me, and I'm like, we've done it this for forever, I have no idea how else to do
Exactly.
it. And then like
That.
after you panic, you're like, oh, they're right. Like,
Right.
like we just have to figure out a new way to do it.
Yeah. When I think people in the industry, all of them feel like at one point they were like these trailblazers and underdogs, and they like have that spirit, and then you're like, okay, well now we're trailblazing, and they're like, stop, and you're like, but it's the same, like you know what I mean? Like it's what you,
exact same.
yeah. So there's like a weird pushback, and I think that's something we could do, that could be better in terms of like. I think right now is the shift, and hopefully, you know, in the next decade, we will start to see, because I think what's frustrating sometimes is that like it feels like a Band-Aid where there needs to be like stitches, right? And it's like in order to do that, you need to like start from the ground up and like start here and start so that there are people of all different backgrounds, ideologies, bringing that to the table so that the same people aren't like creating it and then being like, oh, and then we'll just do like this like little splash on it. You know what I mean? It's like you need people in the room from the jump.
Sure.
And I think that's where, like Jessica was saying, it's like, unfortunately, those people have been there since the dawn of time. So, yeah.
Literal times.
So you are starting to see it though, because also with I do think the pandemic was a really like great wake up call for performers to be like, I'm not putting up with that anymore.
Yeah.
Like I'm just not going to do it. And they realized the bargaining power they sort of had in terms of like not letting things fly. And it's sort of now you have the come-uppers saying, well, if you come with me and we'll just start our own thing. And I think producers are starting to realize like we either have to get on the train or it's going to leave without us. So I hope that continues to be the trend.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys for that. So this is a question for everyone, but I have a hunch that Will's gonna have a good answer for this.
No, I hate that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We're gonna stop.
This would have been the one to feed us before.
All right. We have some education majors who are also theater majors and minors, and also just people like interested in education in general. So what are some job opportunities in theater education that's like outside of the traditional school environment that you've come across?
Yeah. Totally. So for me, I work within a nonprofit organization, and I think there are a lot of ways that an education role may take shape for that, whether that's something like an educational or a cultural institution. A lot of museums might have an education program or something like that. Sometimes they have like an applied or arts integrated approach to their work, so you might be able to use some of that in that type of space. But also a lot of these like professional theater companies have an education arm, and they are in the community teaching and having teaching artists or having people write curriculum. And so
we spend the same amount every year on our education
Yeah.
that we do on a Broadway show. We have like a $4 million budget for our education. It's
Wow.
huge. Sorry, I interrupted you. Just
No,
like, no,
but that's
really,
like,
they do.
it's that's right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So, and I think you bring up though a great point, which is like, oh, so you're going to be a high school theater teacher, and it's like, well, there are a lot of things that aren't that actually that are theater and education, right? That isn't the only path, even though that it seems like it might be. And so I think, like thinking about the landscape of what other theaters have education arms, or what other, types of like nonprofit organizations might do outreach work or work in the community. And so there are a lot of ways to get involved in that space. And I think, just looking out to see what might interest you, right? Whose mission aligns with things you're interested in is really the way to start, I think, because there are so many nonprofits and they all have their own quirks, And so it's like, you're gonna have some, so you might as well pick a place that like you really can double down on and feel good about.
Sure.
Yeah. Anything else you want?
The only other thing is exactly what you've said, but I think one part of the theatrical education that's growing right now, at least in New York, is like workforce. Oh my God, workforce development. So like specialized kind of like training people to be specifically like stage managers or work backstage or costuming or sewing, and like, yeah, that's the only thing that I would add, that I think is becoming more prevalent in like our kind of like teaching artist system.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Cool. Okay, so the last question that I have, and then I want to open it up to y'all. So a lot of my peers asked during this theater lunch what they should be doing now to prepare for a career. Okay, there's a caveat. But I feel like there's a better way to reframe that question, because I feel like it's hard to give your present self enough credit for the work that you're doing in preparation for the rewards that will come for you in the
Sure.
future. So I just don't like that. It makes me sad. So, so what are some things that at the time felt lucky, but reflecting on them back, you realized that you were actually prepared for them? Does that make sense?
No, for sure, yeah. I think, like I said, I felt like I had dipped my toes in a lot of different things here, so I sort of knew what I liked and didn't like as much. So I do feel like I had a pretty good grasp on that. I do think that, like, I mean, for me, I very much needed to like set myself up as far as like roots go before I was able to really branch into, I guess I felt like if I didn't have roots in New York, like an apartment and some friends and
sure.
whatever,
Yeah.
then I was feared, because I grew up in a very small town. I was like, what if I leave then? Because I'm so overwhelmed by this. So I guess I really sort of like put acting or pursuing theater in sort of the back of my mind before I sort of felt like I had created a home base in New York.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, and I feel like you ultimately have so many people that move to a city that they may not necessarily be pursuing the same thing as you, but I think establishing those relationships and making sure that you feel stable in that regard, because it's it at times can be such an unstable career, that feeling like you have something to fall back on. And I feel like that has supported me throughout my theatrical journey. New York has started to at least feels like home. So I think, yeah, setting up, and it doesn't necessarily mean, New York theater is everywhere. I think that's a huge misconception about like a career in the arts. It just like simply does not have to be in New York City at all. So figuring out where you want to go, what place will sort of feed you in that way, because like whatever job you get, I feel like if your house isn't in order, then like you're not going to be able to bring your best self to it. So
It's really good and nice, even if you're not pursuing acting. Like,
yeah, well,
that's great.
yeah, well, and also too, I mean, it's like I was telling them that I've spent a collective 48 hours in my apartment in the last 8 months. So, but feeling like that's still home, because it also, if you're an actor, your life is so transient. And I think at times it can get too transient and you're like, oh no, I've lost touch, like I'm floating in space. But having that sort of like beachhead allows you to sort of feel grounded in a very transient industry. So, yeah.
I think, you should, it's hard because like you're at Vanderbilt and there's this expectation of like perform, like do all of these things, get all of these great grades. And like while those things are important, I think you really need to consciously balance them with like building relationships and like enjoying yourself and reminding yourself like it's okay to not be working all the time.
We struggled with that.
Yeah, we struggled with it, and I think but the reason like we're friends and are still friends is because it's like we had found moments of joy and fun and spontaneous,
absolutely.
Opportunity to do other things. Like there, we aren't still friends because it's like we took the same classes and that's
Right.
it.
No,
like
sure.
it's not because we
Yeah.
all were studying the same thing. It's because we did other things that interested us that maybe weren't just theater. We had all of us had something else on campus that we were also passionate about.
Yeah.
And so I think thinking about that and how do you create for yourself these other spaces of opportunity and being able to like, I don't know, have a break once in a while
Yeah, what a
from
crazy
like the
thing.
theater, which can be really challenging at times for both schedule and just like the rigor of it all. That's okay, you shouldn't feel guilty about that. You shouldn't feel guilty about that.
I think that the thing for me, like I remember when I graduated and like was preparing to like go to grad school, feeling like very like underprepared and like undeserving, and getting there. And also, so this happened like when I got to graduate school, as well as like when I started new jobs and worked on in my career, that if you have like graduated with any type of humanities degree from Vanderbilt, you are going to be able to like write, speak, and communicate thoughts and
100%.
to have reading analysis better than like 80% of people out there. Like even if you're like, but I like got a D and blah blah blah, like better than 80% of people out there.
Yeah.
And it's a huge skill, and it's like kind of a soft skill that's like very, very difficult to it took me a couple of jobs of people reiterating that was something that I was good at before I understood how like marketable a skill it was. So that was my thing, is like that you are probably really great at like communication, like reading analysis, and like connecting things from all over different parts of like, that's not a skill that like most people have. And I think it's kind of taken for granted in the Vanderbilt humanities because folks are pretty smart and people teach things in a really interconnected way. But it's just not the norm out there, and it's definitely a skill to like be proud of when you get out and start working and stuff.
Yeah, the importance of the humanities, I think, is like such a dying field in a lot of ways. There's always this idea of like, oh, go to STEM, like everyone needs to be doing STEM now. So there's something special about the humanities, and it's a skill that isn't being taught in mass production as it used to be. And so to your point, it's like coming out of a space like Vanderbilt with a humanities degree, there is that kind of stamp of like, you're a great communicator. So talk about transferable skills, like right off the bat, just by having this degree, I mean, check. Yeah.
I also think like this is the moment where you're meant to feel unprepared. Like I don't think that like, I think that's part of, you're meant to go through that, not around it. Like it's part of it, and that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, God,
so
thank
much.
you.
I feel all
Yeah.
warm and fuzzy now. I don't know about y'all. We got 10 minutes.
5, 7.
Anyone have?
Technicians waiting to take the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone have any questions? Yeah, Izzy.
Me too. I'm Izzy.
Izzy,
Sorry.
hi.
You kind of, Madeline, you kind of touched on this already a little bit, but something, as I'm coming to terms that I might want to be an actress after school.
Good for you. You've done the hard work.
You described Vanderbilt as like an impressive school, and everyone here is talented and smart. And something I've been struggling with is I'm not a theater major, I'm a minor. And I have these other degrees that I'm getting, and what if I don't use them? And like, if I'm an actress and I'm not using these other degrees I got from Vanderbilt, has been really hard for me. And I don't know if y'all felt that in your experience.
Sure.
What did y'all major in?
I mean, we're not particularly helpful when it comes to like.
But I mean, like, is anyone using their like? Look at anyone in any job.
I mean that like
Look at like someone doing business or consulting, and they studied not that. You know, like Vanderbilt, when we went here, didn't even have a business program for undergraduates.
Still
I
doesn't.
don't know. So yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
it was
like,
just a minor.
then how are your friends going into business?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So I don't know, but I think like
Bars.
a lot of it is transferable too. I think.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think
there are pieces of it for sure.
I also think that like,
Oh no.
first of all, I think that like there's a lot of now it's very much acceptable to be a, as they call it, a multi-hyphenate in terms of like you can be an actor for these 2 years and then you want to go do this for 2 years, but like that doesn't make you less of an actor, and like that's not going to count against you if you go back to acting. And it's also it doesn't all have to happen right now. Like you could very easily pursue your other degrees and then wake up 10 years down the line and say, you know what, I'm going to be an actor. And like that will still be valuable, and like you still will have something to offer at that time. So like I think your anxiety is about a decision that doesn't actually need to be made. Like if you are going to go out there and for a while you pursue theater and it's not filling your cup up, then you can go, but like that doesn't mean that you can't return.
And
like,
I think there are a lot
there's
of
no permanent decision.
And now that I think about it, there are a lot of examples of folks who like make theater and like and use the specific degree to which they like also like had to complement it. Like my friend is creating a show about like a rap show about Brecht in German for the public right now because she speaks German and like loves German. She's majored in German in college, and so like this is like her thing. And I feel like you majored in Spanish, and like you've been able to use Spanish in your like kind of like arts not-for-profit theatrical career, that not just like pure Spanish. I don't know what a pure Spanish career.
Pure Spanish. I'm not sure
Pure
But yeah, you'll find pieces of it that you can transfer, I think, and you should not feel stressed about. I mean, what a blessing too to have multiple things. How many people also maybe just study one thing. So I think you shouldn't feel pigeonholed in that
It's
way.
also going to make you interesting. Like I guarantee you, people are going to be like, "Whoa, you studied that thing! Like what an impressive,
Art history, so.
No, but it's like I really do think that like what I was talking about in terms of like bringing your authentic self. I think a lot of that is having other interests and like being, because what I almost had the opposite problem. I was so theater focused my entire life that it was my favorite thing, and then it became my job. And I was like, well, what do I do for fun now? Like, this is my job now. Like, what are my hobbies? Like, and then you have to like I had to do the opposite work of like integrating things that I had loved throughout my life that like weren't necessarily like my one true love. So I do think bringing all parts of you will always be beneficial. Yeah,
That's good.
What I'd like to suggest, because majors and minors, and really anyone who's here who wants to join us, we're having afternoon tea tomorrow at 4 o'clock in Buttrick, room 123. Very easy to remember. And so bring all those questions with you, and we will have crustless sandwiches and tea.
We're famous.
So, and thank you, alumni, and thank you, Matt.